All right, good afternoon, good evening, Dr. Barnes.
Hello again.
We are son and father, psychologist, PhD, and trial lawyer, and we are talking about trauma-informed legal practice and the various aspects of that. This, I guess, would be session 2.2, 2B. We just got done talking about operational stress, which is basically we learned an occupational hazard of any kind of helping profession, and it's unavoidable. You're going to run into operational stress if you are a trial lawyer, if you are a family law lawyer, a DA, a public defender, an attorney that helps the elderly, maybe elderly abuse cases, nursing home abuse. Basically, any attorney that helps someone who has been or is traumatized and eliciting trauma symptoms. And so that's just part of the business. And we talked about basically what does that look like. And of course, that is the grand topic is compassion fatigue and being informed on how trauma affects your profession and trying to make yourself a better practitioner, being aware of it, right? Being a better advocate for your patients, for your clients. And I think that comes with being informed as to what maybe they're going through and practicing with empathy. So in 2B or whatever we want to call this session, we're going to talk about organizational stress. And so do you want to lead us off with kind of what that is, like a working definition of that?
So organizational stress is the frustration, exhaustion, burnout, disillusionment that people experience just from their day-to-day work lives, more associated with the company that you work for, the firm, or in my world, the hospital or the university that I've worked in. What are the kind of procedures and policies, the work demands, work-life balance, the perfectionistic expectations, those kinds of things, lack of support, lack of communication. So it's generally burnout, that people hang in there working harder and harder, but that they get exhausted from that process.
So organizational stress would be stress that comes from within the organization. And I just defined a word with the words. So, but that's essentially what it is, right? I mean, it is about management essentially, right? And so if lawyers are burnt out and stressed and then are asked to manage other lawyers and paralegals and assistants and receptionists, there can be some dysfunction within the firm, and that can be basically its own type of stress, which is essentially organizational stress, right?
Absolutely. And from a purely neuroscience perspective, the more stressed we are, the more our sympathetic nervous system activates, which is a response to threat. And we have biological, psychological, social implications of that. Again, exhaustion, burnout, increased stress. Our prefrontal cortex goes a little offline, and we don't have, our memory isn't as good as it could be. Staying on top of the tasks, and you talk about all the work that you have to do with the client over the course of months, and staying up on calls and all those things. But the more organizational stress we have, the harder it is to kind of stay current in our day-to-day jobs.
So would that look like, perhaps I always use an attorney as an example because I am one, but could it be a paralegal might suffer from organizational stress when they have an attorney they're working with who maybe at that point dealing with more stress than they can handle and isn't doing what's on the task list in front of them. and the stress that that puts on the paralegal. So, for instance,
Absolutely.
maybe the attorney was in a very, very difficult or traumatic deposition, or maybe a new client intake with a particularly traumatizing event. It comes out and is too tired to return the phone calls to their clients. And
Mhm.
so then the clients call the paralegal and say, "You told me that the attorney was going to call me back." And that is putting then stress on the paralegal, because that's what they thought was going to happen, and it didn't. That would be organizational stress?
Absolutely. And there is a concept of organizational trauma, in that the more firms, hospitals, again, treatment centers, anyone who's a helper,
Hmm.
um, um, has sort of rules and roles and routines and kind of their management, that has those same principles, that they it becomes a significant source of teams not working very well together, inefficiency, um, work not getting done, people not following through on tasks, a lot of rumors and um, um, just not teams not working well together. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's absolutely the case, and I would assume it happens all the time.
Well, in the 2A, or whatever we want to call the session, we talked about operational stress. I led in with a blog that I thought was interesting by Dina Shanker. Basically, the title was "Why Are Lawyers Such Terrible Managers?" And we talked about these turnover rates, which for law firms with 251 to 500 attorneys lost 19% of their associates in 2010, and firms with 100 attorneys or less lost an average of 20% of their associates. And when compared to a Fortune 100 best companies to work for, it was at 2 to 3%. So that turnover rate, I have to assume, has a lot to do with organizational stress,
Absolutely.
mismanagement, and not and again, going to the term that we're talking about, which is trauma informed practice or legal practice, being informed, and that includes management, that includes managing partners or principal partners,
Mhm.
understanding that the nature of our work has operational stress. It has occupational hazards in it, and you need to minimize organizational stress in order to not completely overwhelm your employees with different types of stress, which can lead to gigantic turnover rates like that.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the sources of organizational stress that employees will often talk about, they talk about things like lack of control in the work environment, very high demand. They're always trying to figure out what is the next thing that they have to get to. Um, um, not a lot of morale. People get frustrated, kind of feel like they're left alone on their own little island. Lack of empowerment to make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
because the fear of making an error, lack of collaboration with managers, poor communication throughout the organization, insufficient, and one that's really common is insufficient orientation
Mm-hmm.
for new employees, and the expectation that they know more than they know, particularly new
Yep.
graduates,
Yep.
and not wanting to look like an idiot by asking a lot of questions,
Right.
when in reality, that's how you learn. And that's one of the things that we have learned. Good supervision is one of
Yeah.
the things that fights this.
Well, we talked about that the law firms are generally hierarchical, in that it's a pyramid of sorts with the partners and then the
Mhm.
senior associates, junior associates, and do the upper level give time for the lower levels to come in and download or debrief, ask questions that they might feel are stupid questions. Um, do they allow for that? And if not, you are adding to the organizational stress.
People don't realize a guy by the name of Kotler, who wrote a book for counselors, said that burnout has the wrong name. It should be called rust out. And he said basically that it is this very slow process that just sort of eats away at the energy of the client, of the either therapist or lawyer, whoever the helper is, as they're trying to find ways to combat these frustrations and these kind of points of exhaustion. And a person by the name of Maslach, who's a very well-known researcher on burnout, says that we tend to think exhaustion is the first symptoms of it, when in reality the first symptoms are disillusionment,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea of the belief that I'm not very good at this. Like, I thought I would be better at this. I was a really good student in law school, but I'm really kind of struggling to feel that I'm kind of hitting my stride. They feel that they need to work more hours just to get everything done, when in reality, a little supervision and someone helping them with time management could probably actually take it much more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And it's after a period of time where we keep going back to work at a place that exhausts us that we really begin to feel the exhaustion of the work environment.
Right.
And then over time, the last one Maslach would say is we tend to get cynical,
Mm-hmm.
a little passive aggressive, a little gallows humor, a little kind of lack of trauma informed kind of caring about the client. People talking negatively about clients, and maybe saying things like, I've seen it like on nurses stations where they get frustrated, and
Mm-hmm.
there's just they tend to see the things that are not going well much more than they see the things that are going well.
So for people that are listening that are saying, okay, well, of course, we're all looking at now at our systems, right, and our organization. So people that are listening, that are looking to say, okay, where are our weak points within our organization? Um, those are symptoms. Everything you just said right there are symptoms of an organization that has a lot of organizational stress.
Mhm. Well, and also think about the amount of turnover that we've talked about. When there are organizations that are constantly hiring and training, and then people turning over,
Right.
that it creates more frustration, more actually burnout for the managers, for the kind of managing partners, and just as everyone thinks they've got it all figured out, now there's a whole nother um, set of positions to fill. Um, the other thing that I think we have to kind of keep in mind is there's some research that's come out recently that said that there's a really clear overlap between burnout and depression, and that a lot of what they found was 2/3 of variance for both burnout and depression was related to kind of work-related factors, and that when people are disempowered or disillusioned, that and there's a sense more of a hopelessness. And I think one of the things we talked about with operational stressors
Mm-hmm.
was that we tend to isolate.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to pull away from people, so we don't communicate in ways that maybe would be the most efficient or effective.
Right. And, think about if you are in a particularly stressed mood, maybe you did something, you had a conversation with a client that didn't go well, or one of these operational stressors kind of sunk in. The first thing you do is you shut your door, right? To say, I can't take on any new thing right now. And you isolate, right? You close your door.
Right.
Well, that has a ripple effect throughout the firm. That paralegal that's waiting for you to be done and on to the next thing can't come in because your door's closed to talk about maybe what they're dealing with or whatever your next assignment is. But you're also you're not able to download at that point, right? To talk about that experience that you had that was extremely stressful.
Yes. That I think that's probably the biggest issue, is that burnout sort of begets a lot of the things that people complain about, like the lack of communication, the lack of feeling like they have a say, the lack of control. And it's like a kind of a spinning ball, or like a spiral that just keeps getting bigger and bigger the longer we're in that process. So eventually it's going to strike us, and it happens in our world too, that maybe I need to find a different place.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not the nature of the organ of the business, but it's the it's me in this firm, so I need to go. Or
Which is that disillusionment, right? Or that disempowerment. Say, I'm going to change my external
absolutely.
situation instead of look internal. And so, to summarize, obviously, we talked about operational stressors, which are kind of things bombarding you from outside of the firm or your organization, and that's things that you really can't control. They're going to be part of this. Organizational stress is also somewhat uncontrollable, but can be mitigated. It can be managed, and not just. And I don't mean to say that, oh well, managing partners just need to do a better job. Everyone has to chip in, um, and be open and communicating, and understand everyone's roles and the ecosystem within the organization. But like I kind of gave that example about the paralegal that experiences organizational stress because the attorney's not returning phone calls that they're promising get made. That then can frustrate management because then there could be calls coming in, frustrated clients that aren't getting needs met, and then so it can go up the line the same way as it can come down the line. And so I don't think we're trying to solve organizational stress in this session, which we'll do in the next session. We're just kind of identifying it and helping people, again, the key word, informed. The more informed you can be, the more you can be looking for it. You can be looking for those kind of hot spots in your organization to say, wow, yeah, that is definitely something that we could improve on because it is a giant source of frustration and stress for somebody, whether it be you, somebody's said that this is something that frustrates them. Just being aware of it changes it's like the matrix, right? When you become aware of it, you kind of look at it from an entirely different perspective than, well, this firm's really dysfunctional. Well, why is it dysfunctional? And let's find out, because you could probably find some spots to improve on. So anything in closing that you talking about before you do, the next session will be, we're going to blend the two. We're going to blend operational stress. We're going to blend organizational stress into the trauma continuum, or the infinity symbol that we like to talk about all the time, because they are one and the same. They cause each other. And then we'll talk about what can be done about it. So any closing thoughts for this?
Yeah, and I think that they are so interrelated. It's like to talk about each one separately.
It's hard.
Kind of misses the kind of recursiveness of it.
Right.
So, and I think the other one is, we're in no way saying that, firms need to be different. This is a natural consequence,
right,
of working with traumatized people. And I think
definitely.
And I think, I've been working with compassion fatigue since 1995.
Mm-hmm.
And the legal profession is just getting to the point where they're beginning to say, hey, we're not that different than these other professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's awesome.
That's such a good point, and one we should have stressed at the beginning. We are not sitting here pointing fingers and saying, wow, look how messed up the legal profession is. We're trying to provide context and identifiers to help and say, that study that blog cited is a major problem. That in 2010, within this decade, or I guess right before this decade, you're losing 20% of your associates. There's a reason for it, and it's not just mismanagement, it's stress. And so firms should be able to take stock and inventory in their firms and say, where could we improve on? So yeah, that's such a good point, Dad, that we're not saying, wow, you guys are doing it wrong. We're just saying, let's find a way to do it better. So, and
being open to it. That's we were kind of joking about it in the last, our first video, about how when we've talked to people about this, their initial reaction is to go, I don't see it. And then once they begin to really step back and look at it, they go, wow, that's really a thing, huh?
Right.
It's like, yeah, it is a thing.
So in the next session, we'll kind of put everything together. So we'll see you there.
Yeah, stay tuned.
All right.